A racist flight attendant targeted two black sisters, but she didn't know that their father is the airline CEO. And what happened next changed everything for her. "You people always smell like that." The flight attendant's voice sliced through the boarding area like a whip, her face twisted with disgust as she pointed at 12-year-old Zara and her 10-year-old sister Amara. "I can smell you from here. There's no way you're sitting in premium economy." Zara felt the words hit her like physical blows. Her hand instinctively went to her little sister's shoulder, pulling Amara closer as the younger girl's eyes began to fill with tears. They'd showered that morning. Their mother had braided their hair the night before, working coconut oil through each strand with gentle fingers. They were wearing their Sunday best, the dresses their grandmother had bought them last Christmas, because Mama said you always dress nicely when you travel. But none of that mattered to the woman standing in front of them, her airline uniform crisp and her contempt crystal clear. "Ma'am, we have our boarding passes," Zara said, her voice shaking as she held up the printed tickets. Her mother had checked them in online, made sure everything was perfect. Premium economy, seats 12A and 12B. They were supposed to have extra legroom, complimentary snacks. It was a special treat because they were traveling alone for the first time, going to see Grandma Ruth, who'd been in the hospital for 3 days now. The attendant didn't even glance at the tickets. Her lip curled like she'd tasted something rotten. "I don't care what those passes say. Premium economy is for respectable passengers. Not for," she waved her hand dismissively at the girls, "your kind. Your kind." The words hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. Around them, other passengers slowed their walking, sensing drama, phones already creeping out of their pockets. Some looked away quickly, uncomfortable. Others stared openly, waiting to see what would happen next. Amara's small hand gripped Zara's dress so tight her knuckles went white. "Zara, I want Mama," she whispered, her voice breaking. Zara wanted Mama to... wanted her mother's fierce protection, her father's calm authority. But Mama was back home, probably crying in the car after dropping them at security, worried sick about leaving them but needing to get to work. And Daddy was already in Atlanta on business, the reason why he couldn't fly with them to see Grandma in the first place. They were alone. Two children facing an adult who'd decided they were less than human before they'd even spoken a word. "Please," Zara tried again, hating how her voice cracked. "Our grandmother is sick. She's in the hospital. We need to get to Memphis. Then you can fly coach like everyone else who can't afford better." The attendant crossed her arms. "Or better yet, maybe you shouldn't fly at all. Save everyone the trouble of dealing with the smell." That's when Amara started crying for real, not the quiet tears that had been building, but full sobs that shook her small shoulders. She buried her face in Zara's side, humiliated in front of dozens of strangers who were now definitely watching, definitely recording. And Zara, who'd always been the responsible one, the big sister who followed rules and made good grades and never caused trouble, felt something crack open inside her chest. Rage mixed with shame mixed with a pain so deep it had no name. Now, before you click away thinking this doesn't happen anymore, ask yourself something. If you truly believe no child should ever hear those words, if you've ever been judged by the color of your skin before anyone knew your name, if you think racism has no place in our skies or our society, then you need to see what happened next. Because what these two girls endured in the next 10 minutes, and who was watching from just 30 feet away, would expose a truth that too many people want to pretend doesn't exist. Have you or someone you love ever been treated like you don't belong simply because of how you look? Tell us in the comments where and when it happened, because your story matters just as much as Zara and Amara's. And if you believe that no child, no person, should ever be told they smell bad, that they're not good enough, that their kind doesn't belong, then hit that like button right now and subscribe to Hyper Racism channel. We're exposing these moments that happen every single day while people look the other way. What this flight attendant didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have guessed as she stood there destroying two children's dignity, would change everything in exactly 7 minutes. But first, things were about to get much, much worse. The airport terminal buzzed with the usual chaos of afternoon departures. Families rushing to gates, business travelers glued to laptops, the smell of overpriced coffee mixing with jet fuel and anxiety. Gate 42 was no different, except for the small circle of attention forming around two crying black girls and a flight attendant whose face showed nothing but cold satisfaction. Zara held Amara tighter, trying to be the strong one even though her own vision was blurring with tears. She was 12, almost 13, and she'd spent her whole life being the responsible sister. The one who checked Amara's homework, who made sure they both had lunch money, who held her sister's hand crossing the street, even though Amara complained she was too old for that now. Their mother, Diana, worked double shifts as a nurse at County General. She left before dawn and came home after dark most days, exhausted but always finding energy to ask about their day, to help with projects, to braid their hair while they talked about everything and nothing. She taught them to be polite, to respect authority, to work twice as hard to get half as far because that's what black children had to do in this world. Their father traveled constantly for work, something vague the girls never quite understood, except that it paid for their neat brick house in a good neighborhood, for piano lessons Zara loved, for the art supplies Amara hoarded in her room. He was gone more than he was home, but when he was there, he was fully present. Teaching them chess, taking them to museums, telling them they could be anything they wanted if they worked hard enough, and never letting anyone make them feel small. But right now, Zara felt very small indeed. The flight attendant, whose name tag read, Patricia Morrison 15 years of service, pulled out her radio. She was in her late 40s, with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun that matched the tightness of her expression. Everything about her screamed rigid control, from her perfectly pressed uniform to the way she stood with her spine straight as a ruler, looking down at the girls like they were problems to be solved rather than children to be helped. "I need a supervisor at gate 42, Patricia said into the radio, her voice clipped and professional now that she had an audience. "We have a situation with two unaccompanied minors attempting to board with questionable tickets." "They're not questionable." Zara's voice came out louder than she intended, shrill with desperation. "Mama bought them online. You can see right there, it says premium economy. Our names are on them." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Don't you raise your voice at me, young lady. I've been working for this airline for 15 years. I know a fraudulent ticket when I see one." But she hadn't even looked at the tickets. Not really. She'd glanced at them the way you'd glance at trash you were about to throw away, dismissive and disgusted. Amara's sobs had quieted to hiccuping breaths, but her face was buried so deep in Zara's dress that only the top of her cornrows showed. She was the sensitive one, the little sister who cried at sad movies and brought home injured birds to nurse back to health. She'd been so excited about this trip, about seeing Grandma Ruth, about being grown up enough to fly without parents. Just yesterday, sitting at their kitchen table while their mother packed their small suitcases, Amara had chattered non-stop about the window seat, about watching clouds, about the ginger ale the flight attendants would bring them because Mama said airplane ginger ale tasted better than regular ginger ale. Now she wouldn't even lift her head, wouldn't look at anyone, shrinking into herself like she wanted to disappear. Zara thought about their grandmother lying in a hospital bed in Memphis, waiting for them. Grandma Ruth, who'd had a stroke 3 days ago, whose left side wasn't working right, who'd cried on the phone asking when her babies were coming. Their mother couldn't leave work, couldn't afford to miss the shifts. Their father was stuck in Atlanta at some meeting he couldn't get out of. So the girls were supposed to go alone, to be brave, to help Grandma Ruth feel better just by being there. But they'd never make it now. They'd never get on this plane. This woman had decided they didn't belong, and nothing Zara said or did seemed to matter. "Please," Zara tried one more time, her voice breaking. "Please just look at our tickets. Really look at them. We're not lying. We're not trying to trick anyone. We just want to see our grandma." Patricia's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened further, like Zara's desperation offended her. "What I see are two children who clearly can't afford premium economy trying to sneak into seats that don't belong to them. And honestly, even if the tickets were legitimate, I wouldn't let you sit there. Premium passengers have standards. They pay extra for comfort and service. They shouldn't have to deal with," she paused, her nose wrinkling, "unpleasant smells." The words hit like slaps. Zara felt each one land, felt them sink into her skin, into her bones, into that place where a child's self-worth lives. She smelled fine. She knew she smelled fine. Her mother had made sure of it, had checked them both before they left, had sprayed them with the lavender body mist she saved for special occasions. But this woman was telling her, in front of all these people, that she was dirty. That she was less than. That she and her sister were the kind of people who didn't deserve nice things. A man in a business suit walked past, his briefcase bumping Zara's leg. He glanced at the scene, his brow furrowing, but kept walking. A young couple with a toddler stopped to watch, whispering to each other. An elderly woman shook her head sadly but didn't intervene. Everyone could see what was happening. Nobody was helping. That's when Zara noticed him. A man standing about 30 feet away, partially hidden behind a support column. He was tall, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He held a phone to his ear, but he wasn't talking. He was watching. Staring at Patricia with an intensity that made the air around him seem to vibrate. Something about him seemed familiar, but Zara couldn't place it. Her brain was too scrambled with fear and humiliation to think clearly. The man lowered his phone. His jaw was clenched so tight that Zara could see the muscle jumping even from this distance. His hands, she noticed, were curled into fists at his sides. But he didn't move. Didn't speak. Just watched as Patricia's supervisor finally arrived, a harried-looking man in his 30s with a name tag that read, Stephen Chin, Gate Supervisor. What seems to be the problem? Stephen asked, looking between Patricia and the crying children with obvious concern. Patricia's smile was thin and professional. These two girls are trying to board with tickets that don't match their circumstances. I believe there may have been an error in booking. I've asked them to step aside so we can verify, but they're being uncooperative. We're not being uncooperative. Zara's voice cracked. We just want to show you our tickets. Stephen reached for the boarding passes, and for one hopeful moment, Zara thought maybe, finally, someone would listen. Someone would see that they were telling the truth. But Patricia spoke first, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper that somehow carried perfectly in the tense silence. Stephen, between you and me, I think we need to call security. These children are clearly traveling under suspicious circumstances. No parents, expensive tickets they can't possibly afford, and they're getting increasingly agitated. For the safety of our passengers. We're not agitated, we're scared. Amara's voice came out muffled against Zara's dress, but loud enough to hear. We just want to see our grandma. The man by the column moved. Just slightly, a single step forward, like he was fighting with himself about whether to intervene. Stephen looked at the boarding passes, really looked at them this time. His expression shifted, something like confusion crossing his features. Patricia, these tickets look legitimate to me. The names match, the seat assignments are clear, and according to this, they were purchased 3 weeks ago with a credit card on file. Everything checks out. Patricia's face flushed. That's impossible. Look at them, Stephen. Use your common sense. Do they look like they belong in premium economy? The question hung in the air, ugly and undeniable in its meaning. Stephen's mouth opened, closed. He looked at the girls again, then at Patricia, clearly torn between policy and his co-worker's obvious bias. And the man by the column took another step forward, his phone now at his side, his attention laser-focused on every word being said. Whatever happened next would depend on what Stephen Chin decided in the next 30 seconds. The girl's fate hung in the balance. And the man in the baseball cap was done watching. Stephen Chin held the boarding passes, his eyes scanning back and forth between the printed information and the two trembling girls in front of him. Zara could see the conflict playing out across his face, the way his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. He knew what was right. She could see that he knew. But Patricia stood beside him like a wall of authority, 15 years of service giving her a confidence that made even her supervisor hesitate. Stephen, Patricia pressed, her voice taking on a syrupy patience that somehow made everything worse. I understand you want to be compassionate, but we have protocols for a reason. These children show up alone, no guardian in sight, sitting in premium economy when they clearly, she paused, letting her eyes travel deliberately over the girls' Sunday dresses, their carefully braided hair, their brown skin, when this clearly doesn't add up. I'm simply doing my job by questioning irregularities. Zara forced herself to take a breath, to think like her father always taught her. Stay calm. Use your words. Don't let emotion override logic. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, pulling herself together even though everything inside her was screaming. Sir, she said to Stephen, her voice steadier now, though it still shook at the edges. My name is Zara Thompson. This is my sister, Amara. We're traveling to Memphis to see our grandmother, Ruth Thompson, who's at Baptist Memorial Hospital. She had a stroke. Our mama is Diana Thompson. She's a nurse, and she can't come because she has to work. Our tickets are real. Everything is real. Please, just call the number on our booking confirmation. Please. Stephen looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, Zara thought she'd gotten through. His hand moved toward his radio, like he might actually make that call. But Patricia stepped forward, positioning herself between Stephen and the girls. Or, she said softly, we could call security and let them sort this out. Because what I'm seeing is 2 unaccompanied minors causing a disturbance at my gate, refusing to cooperate with airline staff, and making other passengers uncomfortable with their presence. We're not making anyone uncomfortable. Amara's head finally lifted, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. We're just standing here. We're not doing anything wrong. Patricia's smile was cold. Sweetie, your very presence is disruptive. Look around. You're holding up the boarding process. Passengers are complaining about the smell. Nobody's complaining about any smell. A woman's voice cut through from the waiting area. A black woman in her 60s, wearing a church hat and holding a carry-on, stood up from her seat. I've been sitting right here the whole time. The only thing that stinks is your treatment of these babies. Patricia's face flushed red. Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. It concerns every one of us. An Asian man in a military uniform stood next, his voice quiet but firm. I've been watching this whole thing. Those girls showed you their tickets. You refused to look at them properly. That's not protocol. That's prejudice. More heads turned. More phones came out. The crowd that had been passively watching was starting to shift, starting to see what was really happening. Have you ever watched injustice unfold and had to choose whether to speak up or stay silent? That's the moment dozens of passengers face right now. Some would choose courage. Others would choose comfort. Which would you choose? Patricia's composure cracked slightly, her professional mask slipping. This is inappropriate. All of you need to mind your own business and let me do my job. Your job is to check tickets and help passengers board, the woman in the church hat said, walking closer. Not to humiliate children based on what you think they can or can't afford. Stephen finally found his voice. Patricia, maybe we should just... No. Patricia's voice went sharp, all pretense of professionalism evaporating. I am not letting these girls on this plane. I don't care what their tickets say. I don't care who vouches for them. They don't belong in premium economy, and frankly, I question whether they belong on this flight at all. The words rang out across the gate area, clear and undeniable. No more coded language. No more subtle implications. Just raw, ugly discrimination laid bare for everyone to hear. Zara felt something break inside her, that last piece of hope that maybe this would work out, that maybe someone would help them, that maybe they'd get to see Grandma Ruth after all. She'd been so brave, so strong, but she was just 12 years old, and she was tired of fighting adults who'd already decided she was worthless. Come on, Amara, she whispered, tugging her sister's hand. Let's go call Mama. We're not getting on this plane. Defeat tasted bitter in her mouth. But what else could they do? They were children. Patricia was an adult with authority. Stephen was too afraid to stand up to her. The other passengers were sympathetic but ultimately powerless. This was how it always went, wasn't it? The people with power kept it, and everyone else just had to accept whatever scraps they were given. But as Zara turned to leave, as she prepared to walk away from the gate with her sobbing sister, as she mentally rehearsed how she'd tell their mother they'd failed to reach Grandma Ruth, something happened. The man in the baseball cap stepped out from behind the column. He walked forward with deliberate steps, each footfall seeming to echo despite the carpeted floor. People moved aside without quite knowing why, creating a path for him. His cap was still pulled low, But now Zara could see his face more clearly. Could see the fury carved into every line, the barely controlled rage making his entire body rigid. And suddenly she knew why he looked familiar. "Daddy." Amara's voice came out as barely a whisper, confused and hopeful and scared all at once. The man reached up and removed his baseball cap, revealing features that were unmistakably theirs. The same deep brown eyes. The same strong jawline. Marcus Thompson stood at his full 6'3" height, and the air around him seemed to crackle with contained power. Patricia's face went from red to white in an instant. Because she'd just seen the ID badge clipped to his belt, previously hidden under his untucked shirt. Marcus Thompson, Chief Executive Officer, Skyward Airlines. She'd been terrorizing the CEO's daughters for the past 15 minutes. And he'd heard every single word. The gate area fell into absolute silence. The kind of silence that happens when everyone simultaneously realizes they're witnessing something momentous, something that will be talked about for years to come. Even the overhead announcements seemed to pause, as if the entire airport was holding its breath. Marcus Thompson didn't run to his daughters. He walked with measured steps, his eyes never leaving Patricia's face. She stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air, all color draining from her face as the reality of her situation crashed over her in devastating waves. "Daddy," Zara whispered again, and this time she couldn't hold back the sob that broke through. All the strength she'd been forcing herself to maintain shattered. She was just a little girl who needed her father, and suddenly he was here, and she didn't have to be brave anymore. Marcus reached his daughters and dropped to one knee, pulling them both into his arms. Amara buried her face in his shoulder, her whole body shaking with sobs. Zara clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had tilted sideways. "I'm here," he murmured into their hair, his voice rough with emotion. "I've got you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He'd been standing there the whole time, watching his babies be humiliated, be told they smelled bad, be told they didn't belong. He'd heard every cruel word, witnessed every tear, felt every moment of their pain as if it were his own. And he'd forced himself to wait, to let it play out, because he needed to see exactly who Patricia Morrison was when she thought no one important was watching. Now everyone was watching. Marcus stood slowly, his daughters still pressed against his sides. When he turned to face Patricia, his expression was carved from stone. "Ms. Morrison," he said quietly, his voice carrying absolute authority despite its low volume. "How long did you say you've worked for this airline?" Patricia's mouth worked soundlessly. Stephen Chen had backed away, his face a mixture of horror and relief that he wasn't the target of that terrible, controlled fury. 15 years, Marcus continued when she didn't answer. 15 years of service. That's what your name tag says. 15 years of representing Skyward Airlines. 15 years of being the face of this company to thousands of passengers. He paused, letting each word land like a hammer blow. "And in 15 years, did no one ever teach you that discrimination is not just morally reprehensible, it's illegal?" "Mr. Thompson, I didn't know," Patricia stammered, her hands shaking so badly her radio nearly fell from her grip. "You didn't know what?" His voice went even quieter, even more dangerous. "You didn't know they were my daughters? Or you didn't know that treating children with such cruelty was wrong?" Patricia's face crumpled. "I didn't mean. You said they smelled bad." Marcus's jaw clenched so tight that Zara could hear his teeth grind. "You told my daughters, who showered this morning, who are wearing clean clothes, who did everything right, that they stink. You said their kind doesn't belong in premium economy. You threatened to call security on 2 children whose only crime was being black in a space you decided they didn't deserve to occupy." Each accusation landed like a physical blow. Patricia swayed on her feet, tears streaming down her face now, her career dissolving before her eyes. "Sir, please," she whispered. "I have children. I need this job. I didn't know." "That's the problem," Marcus cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "You didn't think you needed to know. You saw 2 black girls and made every assumption you've been trained not to make. You saw their skin color and decided they were less than. Unworthy. Suspicious. And you felt perfectly comfortable telling them so because you thought there would be no consequences. The woman in the church hat spoke up from behind them. Brother, I recorded the whole thing. Every word she said to those babies. Every cruel, hateful word. So did I, the man in military uniform added. I got it too, called someone else. Phones were everywhere now, dozens of them, all pointed at Patricia Morrison's public unraveling. The evidence was irrefutable, documented from multiple angles, time-stamped, and devastating. Marcus pulled out his own phone, his thumb moving across the screen with quick, decisive movements. I'm texting my head of HR right now. By the time we're done here, she'll have your complete employment file pulled. Every complaint. Every incident. Every time someone tried to tell us you had a problem with passengers who didn't look like you. Patricia's legs seemed to give out. She grabbed the counter for support, her professional composure destroyed. Please, she begged. Please, I'll apologize. I'll do whatever you want. Don't take away my livelihood. Marcus looked down at Zara and Amara, these two precious girls who'd been brave beyond their years, who'd tried so hard to do everything right and been punished for existing. What do you think, baby girl? He asked Zara gently. Should I accept her apology? Zara looked at Patricia, this woman who'd called her dirty, who'd made Amara cry, who'd tried to steal their dignity in front of strangers. Part of her wanted to say yes, to be gracious, to take the high road her mother always preached about. But then she remembered Patricia's face when she'd said those words. The satisfaction. The certainty. The complete lack of remorse until she'd realized who she was dealing with. She's only sorry because she got caught, Zara said quietly. She's not sorry for what she did to us. She's sorry it was us. Marcus nodded slowly, pride and pain warring across his features. His 12-year-old daughter had just articulated something too many adults refused to acknowledge. That apologies without genuine remorse were just words, empty and meaningless. He lifted his phone to his ear. Angela? It's Marcus. I need you at gate 42 immediately. We have a situation that requires your personal attention. Bring security with you. Patricia made a sound like a wounded animal. Stephen Chen was typing frantically on his tablet, probably trying to document everything to protect himself from the fallout that was about to consume his gate. The passengers watched in stunned silence, witnessing justice unfold in real time, watching power used not for personal gain but for protection, for accountability, for the simple radical act of defending children who deserved better. But as Marcus held his daughters close, as Patricia Morrison's world collapsed around her, as security and HR began making their way through the terminal, something else was happening. The video the woman in the church hat had recorded was already uploading. Already going viral. Already spreading across social media like wildfire. Within minutes, millions would see what Patricia had done. Within hours, every major news outlet would be calling. Within days, this moment would spark a national conversation about racism in air travel, about who gets believed and who gets questioned, about the everyday discrimination that people of color face in spaces they have every right to occupy. But none of them knew that yet. None of them knew how big this moment would become. All they knew was that finally, after 15 minutes of hell, Zara and Amara Thompson were being seen as what they truly were. Children who deserved love and protection and basic human decency. And the woman who denied them that was about to face consequences she'd spent 15 years believing would never come. Angela Rodriguez, Skyward Airlines head of human resources, arrived at gate 42 within 4 minutes, flanked by 2 security officers. She was a short woman with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything the airline industry had to throw at her. But when she took in the scene, her eyes widened slightly. The CEO of the entire airline, kneeling beside 2 crying children. A flight attendant was visibly falling apart at the counter. Dozens of passengers with phones out, recording everything. And an atmosphere so charged with tension it felt like the air itself might crack. Marcus, Angela said carefully, using his first name in a way that spoke of years of working together. Tell me what happened. Before Marcus could speak, Patricia lurched forward, desperation making her reckless. Angela, thank God you're here. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. I was just following protocol, checking tickets like we're supposed to, and Mr. Thompson has completely overreacted. Overreacted? The woman in the church had stood up, her voice ringing with righteous fury. Overreacted? I have you on video telling these babies they stink. Telling them their kind doesn't belong in premium economy. You want to hear what overreacting sounds like? Keep talking. Patricia's face flushed red again, panic and anger mixing into something volatile. I never said that. She's lying. They're all lying. Her voice was rising now, control slipping away as she realized the hole she was in kept getting deeper. This is a setup. He probably told them to act like this, to cause a scene so he could. So I could what? Marcus's voice cut through her hysteria like a knife. He stood slowly, positioning himself between Patricia and his daughters. So I could catch you treating children with the kind of cruelty that's apparently become acceptable at my airline? Is that what you think happened here? You were hiding. Patricia's finger jabbed toward him accusingly, her professional veneer completely gone now. You were standing over there in disguise, watching, waiting to trap me. What kind of CEO does that? The kind who gets anonymous complaints every month about discrimination at his gates, Marcus said quietly. The kind who's heard too many stories about passengers of color being questioned, harassed, told they don't belong in the seats they paid for. The kind who needed to see for himself if those complaints were real or exaggerated. He pulled out his phone, pulling up a folder of documents. Want to know how many complaints we've had about you specifically, Ms. Morrison? In the past 3 years alone. Patricia's face went white. Those were all misunderstandings. 17 complaints, Marcus continued, his voice steady but his eyes blazing. 17 separate passengers, all people of color, all claiming you treated them with suspicion and disrespect. 17 times your supervisors were told something was wrong. And 17 times, nothing was done because you've been here 15 years and you know how to make complaints disappear. Stevenson made a strangled sound. He was absolutely going to be questioned about why those complaints never went further, and they both knew it. Angela was typing rapidly on her tablet, her expression growing darker with every word. Patricia, is this true? Did you tell these children they smelled bad? They did smell. I was just being honest. Patricia was fully unraveling now, her desperation making her say things she should have kept silent. And yes, I questioned their tickets because how is a nurse supposed to afford premium economy for 2 kids? It doesn't add up. I was doing my job. The military veteran spoke up, his voice cold. Their mother's profession is your business? How exactly? I have a right to question suspicious circumstances. Patricia shot back, her voice shrill now. Have you ever watched someone destroy themselves with their own words? Seen someone dig their hole deeper with every sentence? That's what passengers at Gate 42 witnessed as Patricia Morrison threw away 15 years of employment in under 5 minutes. You have a right to check valid tickets, Angela said, her voice hard as stone. You don't have the right to racially profile passengers. You don't have the right to tell children they smell bad. You don't have the right to make assumptions about anyone's financial situation based on their skin color. I never said it was about their skin color. Patricia shrieked. Then what was it about? Marcus asked softly. Explain to me what made you decide my daughters didn't belong in those seats. Explain what protocol you were following when you told them they smelled bad. Explain why you threatened to call security before you even properly examined their boarding passes. Patricia's mouth opened and closed. Her eyes darted around the gate, looking for support, for someone to back her up, for any escape from the corner she'd backed herself into. She found none. Even Stevenson was shaking his head, distancing himself from the wreckage of her career. This is unfair, Patricia whispered, tears streaming down her face again. I'm being crucified for one mistake. One bad day. Everyone makes mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Amara's small voice cut through the tension. She'd finally lifted her head from her father's side, her face still wet with tears but her eyes fierce. Mistakes are accidents. You meant every word you said to us. You enjoyed it. The 10-year-old's words hit harder than anything the adults had said. Because she was right. They'd all seen Patricia's face when she was humiliating the girls, before she knew anyone important was watching. There'd been satisfaction there. Power. The pleasure of putting someone she saw as lesser in their place. Patricia stared at Amara, opening her mouth to respond, and that's when she made her final, fatal mistake. "You don't get to speak to me like that, you little..." She caught herself, but too late. The word hung unspoken in the air, but everyone knew what she'd been about to say. Marcus moved forward so fast that Angela had to grab his arm. The security officers stepped closer, suddenly on alert. And Patricia realized she'd just crossed a line there was no coming back from. Whatever happened next would determine not just her fate, but whether this moment became a turning point or another example of accountability denied. The entire gate held its breath, waiting to see if justice would finally be served. Angela's hand tightened on Marcus's arm, holding him back, but her eyes had gone cold as ice. She turned to Patricia with an expression that made the flight attendant take an involuntary step backward. "Finish that sentence," Angela said, her voice deadly quiet. "Go ahead. Say what you were about to call a 10-year-old child." Patricia's face had gone from white to gray, the color of ash. Her hands trembled so badly that her radio clattered to the floor. I didn't mean." "You did mean it." Marcus's voice was controlled again, but barely. His daughters could feel the fury radiating from him like heat from a furnace. "You've meant every single thing you've said and done today. The only thing you regret is getting caught." The woman in the church hat walked up to the counter, her phone held high, still recording. "I got that too. Got you about to call that baby something that would get you more than fired in a just world." She looked at Angela. "You going to handle this, or do I need to make sure this video goes somewhere that will?" "It's already handled," Angela said, her fingers flying across her tablet. "Patricia Morrison, effective immediately, your employment with Skyward Airlines is terminated. Security will escort you from the premises. You'll receive information about your final paycheck and benefits via email. Your access to all airline systems has been revoked as of this moment." Patricia's knees buckled. She grabbed the counter to keep from falling. No, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't do this. I have bills, I have children to feed, I have a mortgage." "You should have thought about that before you terrorized mine," Marcus said, his voice like stone. "You had 17 chances to change. 17 complaints that should have been wake-up calls. Instead, you got comfortable in your prejudice because no one held you accountable. That ends today. Mr. Thompson, please." Patricia was on her knees now, literally begging, all dignity abandoned. "I'll do anything. I'll take sensitivity training. I'll apologize publicly. I'll work for free. Please, I need this job." Zara watched this woman who'd seemed so powerful 15 minutes ago reduced to sobbing on the floor, and she felt something complicated twist in her chest. Not sympathy, exactly, but an understanding that this moment would define Patricia's life the way Patricia had tried to define theirs. The difference was, Patricia had chosen this. Zara and Amara just wanted to see their grandmother. "You want to apologize?" Marcus asked, his voice still hard. "Then apologize to them. Not to me. To the children you tried to humiliate." Patricia crawled forward on her knees, mascara streaming down her face, snot running from her nose. She looked up at Zara and Amara, and for the first time, they saw something that might have been genuine remorse beneath the desperation. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for what I said to you. For how I made you feel. You didn't deserve any of that. None of it. I was wrong. I was so wrong." Amara buried her face in her father's side again, unwilling to even look at the woman. But Zara, the responsible one, the eldest by 2 minutes, the girl who always tried to find the good in people, looked Patricia in the eye. "I accept your apology," Zara said quietly, "but it doesn't change what you did. It doesn't take back the words. And it doesn't mean you should keep your job. Because you didn't just hurt us today. You've been hurting people for years, and you only stopped because you got caught." The wisdom in those words, coming from a 12-year-old who should have been thinking about schoolwork and sleepovers instead of institutional racism and accountability, made several passengers wipe their eyes. The military veterans stepped forward. That little girl has more integrity in her pinky than you've shown in 15 years. She's giving you more grace than you deserve. The woman in the church hat nodded. Baby's got the wisdom of someone 3 times her age. Her mama raised her right. Security officers helped Patricia to her feet. She was still crying, still begging as they guided her away from the gate. Her voice echoed back through the terminal, a public spectacle of consequences finally catching up with cruelty. Stephen Chin approached cautiously, his tablet clutched to his chest like a shield. "Mr. Thompson, sir, I want to apologize for not acting sooner. I should have shut this down the moment I saw that those tickets were legitimate. I let her intimidate me, and that's on me." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "You're right. It is on you. Which is why you're going to spend the next 6 months undergoing intensive training on how to handle discrimination complaints. And you're going to personally review every complaint filed at this gate for the past 5 years. If I find out you buried even one legitimate concern, you'll be following Patricia out that door. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Absolutely, sir." Stephen looked like he might throw up, but was also relieved. He was getting a second chance Patricia wouldn't receive. Angela closed her tablet with a decisive click. "Marcus, the girls' flight boards in 20 minutes. I've upgraded them to first class, seats 1A and 1B. I'll personally escort them to the aircraft and make sure every crew member knows they're flying under my direct supervision." "Thank you, Angela." Marcus knelt again, bringing himself eye level with his daughters. "You two okay to fly? We can drive if you need to. I'll rent a car right now, and we can be on the road in 30 minutes. Zara looked at Amara, and that twin communication passed between them wordlessly. They'd been through hell, but they'd survived it. And Grandma Ruth was waiting. "We want to fly," Zara said. "We're not letting what she did steal this from us." Pride shone in Marcus's eyes. Mixed with tears, he was too much of a father to hide. "That's my girls. That's my brave, strong, incredible girls." He pulled them both into a fierce hug, and for a moment, the watching crowd saw not the CEO of a major airline but simply a father protecting his children, loving them through their pain, showing them that they were valued and precious and worthy of every good thing the world had to offer. The passengers began to applaud. Slowly at first, then building, until the entire gate was clapping, some people standing, others wiping tears, all of them bearing witness to a moment of justice that happened too rarely in a world that needed it desperately. The woman in the church hat approached, pulling both girls into her soft embrace. "You two are warriors. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small again." "Thank you for speaking up," Zara said, her voice muffled against the woman's shoulder. "Thank you for not staying quiet. Baby, I'm a 72-year-old black woman who lived through Jim Crow. I've seen too much, been through too much, to stay quiet when I see children being hurt. My silence died a long time ago." Other passengers approached, offering words of support, giving the girls snacks and toys from their bags, and treating them with the kindness and respect Patricia had denied them. An elderly white couple pressed gift cards into Marcus's hand for the girls. A young mother gave them her daughter's favorite stuffed animals. The military veteran saluted them both, formal and serious and full of respect. Humanity, in its best form, was trying to heal what Patricia had broken. But as the gate agents prepared to board the flight, as Marcus prepared to say goodbye to his daughters and head to his own flight to Atlanta, his phone buzzed with an alert that made his expression shift. The video had gone viral. 5 million views in 30 minutes. Every major news outlet was running the story. The airline's stock had dropped 3%. The board of directors was calling an emergency meeting. And someone had identified Patricia Morrison. Her name, her Facebook page, and her entire life were being exposed to the harsh light of public judgment. What started as one woman's cruelty to 2 children had become a national reckoning. And it was only just beginning. Marcus showed Angela his phone screen, and she let out a low whistle. "It's everywhere. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, BBC. Social media is on fire. The hashtag is Justice for Zara and Amara." "What does that mean?" Amara asked, tugging on her father's sleeve. He knelt, cupping her face gently. "It means people saw what happened to you. Millions of people. And they're angry about it. They're demanding change. Good, Amara said with a fierceness that surprised everyone. Everyone should know what she did. Within an hour, Patricia Morrison's life as she knew it was over. Her name trended worldwide. Her social media accounts, before she could delete them, were screenshotted and shared, revealing years of questionable posts about those people, welfare queens, and thugs. Her church released a statement distancing itself from her views. Her neighbors were interviewed, some defending her as a good person who made a mistake, others revealing she'd been the subject of complaints in their homeowners association for targeting black families. The 17 previous complaints against her were leaked to the press, each one a damning pattern of behavior that Skyward Airlines had ignored. Passengers came forward with their own stories, people who'd been humiliated at Patricia's gate but had felt powerless to fight back. A black businessman described being questioned about his first-class ticket despite wearing a suit that cost more than Patricia's monthly salary. A Latina doctor recounted being told to move to economy because she didn't look like a premium passenger. An elderly Asian couple shared how Patricia had spoken to them slowly and loudly, assuming they didn't speak English. The pattern was undeniable. Patricia Morrison hadn't just had one bad day. She'd had 15 years of bad days, and Skyward Airlines had enabled every single one of them. Angela's phone rang constantly. The board demanding answers. The media demanding interviews. Advocacy groups demanding policy changes. The FAA launching an investigation into discrimination complaints across the entire airline industry. "This is bigger than one flight attendant," Angela said quietly to Marcus as they watched Zara and Amara board the plane, surrounded by airline employees treating them like royalty. "This is about every person of color who's been made to feel like they don't belong in spaces they paid to occupy. Your daughters just sparked something massive." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "But let it burn. Let every airline, every corporation, every institution that's been ignoring discrimination complaints feel the heat. Maybe then they'll finally do something about it." The girls took their seats in first class, 1A and 1B, right at the front of the plane. The flight attendants serving their cabin were hand-selected by Angela, all of them people of color, all of them briefed on what had happened, all of them determined to show Zara and Amara what respectful service actually looked like. The captain himself came out to greet them, a distinguished black man in his 50s with captain's wings gleaming on his uniform. "Ladies, I'm Captain James Wilson, and it's my honor to fly you to Memphis today. Your grandmother is going to be so proud when she hears how brave you were." Zara's eyes welled up again, but this time with something that felt like healing. "Thank you, sir." As the plane pushed back from the gate, as Memphis grew closer with every minute, the girls looked out their windows at the world that had tried to break them and failed. Have you ever wondered how many Patricia Morrisons are out there right now, treating people with cruelty because they think no one's watching? How many children have been humiliated without cameras to document it, without CEOs to defend them? Drop a comment if you believe every single person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of who their parents are. The flight was smooth. The service was impeccable. And when they landed in Memphis, Grandma Ruth was waiting. But the story was far from over. Because what happened at Gate 42 would change everything, for everyone, in ways no one could have predicted. Grandma Ruth sat propped up in her hospital bed, her left side still weak from the stroke, but her right arm strong enough to hold both her grandbabies close. Tears streamed down her face as Zara and Amara took turns telling her what had happened, their voices overlapping, filling in details the other missed. "And then Daddy was there," Amara said, her small hand clutching her grandmother's hospital gown. "He'd been watching the whole time, Grandma. He heard everything she said to us." Ruth looked at her son, Marcus, who stood at the foot of the bed with his arms crossed, his expression still carrying the weight of what his daughters had endured. "You were there the whole time and you didn't say anything?" "I had to see it, Mama," Marcus said quietly. "I had to witness exactly what happens when people think no one important is watching. If I'd stepped in right away, she would have changed her tune, put on her professional face, and my girls wouldn't have learned what they needed to learn." "And what's that?" Ruth asked, her speech slightly slurred, but her mind sharp as ever. "That the world isn't always fair," Zara said, her voice soft but steady. That people will judge us before they know us. That we have to be twice as good and twice as strong just to be seen as equal. Ruth's eyes filled with fresh tears. Baby, you're 12 years old. You shouldn't have to know that yet. But I do know it now, Zara said. And I can't unknow it. Every time I walk into a room from now on, I'm going to wonder if people are judging me. If they're thinking I don't belong. If they're making assumptions about who I am based on what I look like. Marcus moved to sit on the edge of the bed, taking his daughter's hand. That's the burden we carry, sweetheart. The burden every black person in this country carries. Your grandmother carried it. I carry it. And yes, now you carry it too. But you know what else you carry? What? Amara asked. Power, Marcus said firmly. You carry the power of knowing the truth. The power of having your voice heard. The power of a platform that most people never get. What happened to you was terrible and wrong and should never have happened. But it did happen, and now millions of people know your names. Know your story. And you get to decide what to do with that. Ruth nodded, squeezing her granddaughters closer. When I was your age, Zara, I couldn't sit at the lunch counter at Woolworth's. When I tried, grown men spat on me. Called me names I won't repeat. And you know what the worst part was? Nobody cared. There were no cameras. No viral videos. No consequences. Those men went home to their families like nothing happened, and I went home with spit in my hair and hate in my heart. Grandma, Amara whispered, horrified. But things changed, Ruth continued, her voice stronger now. Not because people suddenly became good, but because people like you, baby girls, people who refused to be silent, who stood up even when they were scared, who demanded to be treated like human beings, they changed things. Inch by inch. Year by year. Generation by generation. Marcus pulled out his phone, showing his mother the news coverage. Mama, because of what happened to the girls, Skyward Airlines is implementing a complete overhaul of its discrimination policies. Every employee, from baggage handlers to executives, is going through mandatory bias training. They're creating an independent oversight committee to review complaints. They're establishing a compensation fund for passengers who've experienced discrimination. It's not just Skyward, he continued, scrolling through articles. Delta announced new policies this morning. United followed 2 hours later. American Airlines just released a statement. What Patricia Morrison did to my babies is forcing an entire industry to look at itself and admit it has a problem. Zara looked at her father, something like wonder in her eyes. All because she was mean to us? All because she was mean to you and got caught, Marcus corrected gently. That's the difference, baby girl. How many times do you think this has happened before, to people who didn't have a CEO for a father? How many children have been humiliated at gates, in stores, in schools, and nobody important enough saw it to make it matter? The question hung heavy in the hospital room. So what do we do? Zara asked. How do we make sure it matters for everyone, not just us? Marcus smiled, pride shining through his exhaustion. We use our voice. We tell our story. We make sure people understand this isn't about one bad flight attendant. It's about systems that allow discrimination to flourish. It's about the 17 complaints that were ignored. It's about every person who stayed silent when they witnessed injustice because it was easier than getting involved. Ruth reached for the remote, turning on the TV mounted on the hospital wall. The news was showing footage from the gate, Zara and Amara's tear-stained faces, and Patricia's cruel words caught on multiple cameras from multiple angles. The cheer-in read, Viral video sparks national conversation about racism in air travel. A panel of experts debated what it meant, what should be done, and whether this was an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern. Some defended Patricia, claiming she'd been unfairly targeted, that everyone makes mistakes. Others called for industry-wide reform, for consequences that actually deterred discriminatory behavior. Look at that, Ruth said, gesturing at the screen. Your faces, your story, making people uncomfortable. Making them think. Making them choose sides. That's power, babies. That's the kind of power that changes the world. I just wanted to see you, Grandma, Amara said, her voice small. I didn't want to change the world. I just wanted to get on a plane. I know, sugar, Ruth said, kissing her forehead. And that's exactly why your story matters so much. You weren't trying to be heroes. You weren't looking for attention. You were just two little girls trying to visit their sick grandmother, and someone decided that was too much for you to be allowed to do without humiliation. That's the evil of everyday racism. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up and tells you that you don't deserve basic dignity. Marcus's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and smiled. The woman who recorded everything, the one in the church hat? Her name is Dorothy Banks. She's been invited to speak at the NAACP convention next month about the importance of being an active bystander. She's calling it standing up when it's uncomfortable. I want to meet her, Zara said suddenly. I want to thank her for not staying quiet. We'll make that happen, Marcus promised. And you know what else? The military veteran who spoke up? He's written an op-ed for the New York Times about racism he's witnessed in his 20 years of service. The young couple who gave you their daughter's toys? They've started a foundation to help families who face discrimination but can't afford lawyers to fight back. One moment of witnessed cruelty had sparked a movement. One woman's decision to record instead of looking away had created accountability. One CEO's decision to let his daughters experience injustice before stepping in had exposed a system that protected perpetrators over victims. Will things actually change? Zara asked, her 12-year-old cynicism breaking through. Or will everyone forget about this in a week and go back to the way things were? Marcus looked at his daughter, this child who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who'd learned lessons about the world that no child should have to learn. Some people will forget, he admitted. Some people will dismiss it as overblown, as an isolated incident, as much ado about nothing. But some people won't forget. Some people will remember your faces and your tears and your courage. And those people, the ones who choose to remember, to act, to demand better, they're the ones who'll make sure this moment meant something. Ruth nodded slowly. Change is slow, babies. Slower than it should be. But it happens. It happens because people like you refuse to accept cruelty as normal. Because people like Dorothy Banks refuse to stay silent. Because people like your daddy use their power to protect instead of just profit. Every generation pushes the line a little further toward justice. This is your push. Amara looked up at her grandmother, her eyes still red from crying but also filled with something that looked like determination. I don't want any other kids to feel the way we felt today. Nobody should feel like that. Then you keep telling your story, Ruth said. You keep reminding people that behind every statistic about discrimination, there's a real child with real feelings. You make them see you as human, not as a problem or a threat or someone who doesn't belong. You make them see you, baby girl. And once they really see you, they can't unsee you. Outside Ruth's hospital room, the world continued spinning. Patricia Morrison's life continued unraveling. Skyward Airlines stock continued to fluctuate. News coverage continued spreading. And somewhere, another child of color was boarding another plane, walking into another store, entering another space where someone might decide they didn't belong. But because of what happened at Gate 42, because two girls refused to be silenced and a bystander refused to look away, maybe that next child would face a little less hatred. Maybe that next complaint would be taken seriously. Maybe that next Patricia Morrison would think twice before letting prejudice guide her actions. Maybe. Hopefully. Possibly. It wasn't justice, not completely. True justice would be a world where Zara and Amara could fly to see their grandmother without anyone questioning their right to exist in whatever seat they'd paid for. But it was accountability. It was a consequence. It was one small step toward a world where Dorothy Banks wouldn't need to pull out her phone, where Marcus Thompson wouldn't need to hide and watch his daughters suffer to prove discrimination was real, where 12-year-old girls could just be 12-year-old girls without carrying the weight of representing their entire race. That world wasn't here yet. But maybe, just maybe, it was a little bit closer than it had been yesterday. And that had to be enough to keep fighting for. 6 months after Gate 42, Zara and Amara Thompson stood on a stage at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, the same city where their grandmother was now recovering at home, her speech almost back to normal, her left side growing stronger every day. They'd been invited to speak at a youth summit about discrimination in public spaces. Behind them, A screen displayed the viral video that had changed their lives, frozen in the moment. Patricia Morrison's face twisted with disgust as she pointed at two crying children who'd done nothing wrong except exist while black. "We didn't ask to be activists," Zara said into the microphone, her voice steady now, strengthened by 6 months of interviews, speeches, and learning that her pain could be transformed into purpose. "We just wanted to see our grandma. But sometimes life chooses you for something bigger than what you planned." Amara, now 11, stepped forward. "That day at the airport, I learned that people will judge you before they know you. That your skin color can make someone decide you're not good enough, not worthy, not deserving of basic respect. And for a long time, I was angry about that. I'm still angry sometimes." The audience, filled with teenagers and young adults from across the country, nodded in recognition. Many had their own stories of being followed in stores, questioned by police, told they didn't belong in spaces they had every right to occupy. "But I also learned something else," Amara continued. "I learned that silence enables cruelty. That bystanders who do nothing are just as guilty as the people who hurt us. And I learned that one person with courage, like Ms. Dorothy Banks, who recorded everything, can change the entire story." Dorothy Banks sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, her church hat perfectly positioned as always. Next to her sat the military veteran, the young couple who'd given their toys, and dozens of other passengers from that flight who'd chosen to speak up instead of look away. Marcus Thompson watched from the wings, his heart swelling with pride and breaking with sadness all at once. His daughters had gained power and a platform, but they'd lost something too. An innocence. A belief that the world was fundamentally fair. They'd been forced to grow up faster than any child should have to, made to understand adult concepts of systemic racism and institutional bias before they'd even started high school. But they were using that forced maturity to help others. And maybe that's what healing looked like. Not forgetting the pain, but transforming it into something that protected the next child, educated the next generation, and shifted the culture one uncomfortable conversation at a time. Patricia Morrison lost her job that day, Zara said, her voice thoughtful. A lot of people cheered for that. A lot of people said she got what she deserved. And maybe she did. But firing one person doesn't fix the system that protected her for 15 years. Punishing one flight attendant doesn't change the fact that this happens every single day to people who don't have cameras documenting it, who don't have CEOs for fathers, who don't have the power to fight back. She paused, looking out at the young faces watching her. Real change requires all of us. It requires people like Ms. Banks who refuse to stay silent when they witness injustice. It requires people like our dad who use their power to protect instead of just profit. It requires all of you, everyone in this room, to decide that discrimination is not something you'll tolerate, not something you'll ignore, not something you'll explain away. The applause started slowly, then built, until the entire auditorium was on its feet. But Zara held up her hand, not quite finished. And it requires something harder, she continued. It requires us to see people like Patricia Morrison not just as monsters, but as products of a society that taught them to fear and hate people who look different. It requires us to want transformation, not just punishment. To build systems that prevent discrimination instead of just systems that punish it after it happens. Those words, wise beyond her 13 years, spoken from hard-won experience, reflected the journey both girls had traveled. From victims to advocates. From humiliated children to powerful voices. From silence to sound that echoed across a nation still struggling with its original sin. After the speech, as they signed autographs and took photos with young people who saw themselves in the Thompson sisters' story, Marcus pulled them aside. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "Not because you're famous now, not because you handled the media well, but because you took something terrible and turned it into something meaningful. You could have stayed bitter. You could have let that day define you as victims. Instead, you decided to be survivors who help others survive too. Do you think things will really change, Daddy?" Amara asked the question she'd been asking for 6 months now. Marcus looked at his youngest daughter, this child who still slept with a nightlight and cried during sad movies but had also testified before Congress about discrimination in public accommodations. "I think they already have, baby girl. Not everywhere. Not completely. But Skyward Airlines reported a 93% increase in people filing discrimination complaints. You know what that means. Both girls shook their heads. It means people who would have stayed silent, who would have swallowed their humiliation and moved on, now believe they'll be heard. Now believe their complaints matter. That's because of you. That's because you showed people that speaking up can lead to accountability. 3 major airlines had changed their policies. Dozens of employees had been fired or retrained after review of past complaints. A new federal law was working through Congress, requiring independent oversight of discrimination complaints in the travel industry. It was called the Thompson Act. None of it would have happened if 2 girls had stayed silent. If a bystander had looked away. If a CEO had prioritized his company's reputation over his daughter's dignity. As they left the museum, walking past exhibits chronicling the long, painful history of civil rights in America, Zara thought about all the people who'd come before them. The children who'd integrated schools while adults screamed hatred. The teenagers who'd sat at lunch counters while grown men poured food on their heads. The college students who'd ridden buses into danger to register voters. Her pain was part of a continuum. Her courage was inherited. Her voice was amplified by generations of voices that had come before, demanding to be seen as fully human, fully worthy, fully deserving of dignity and respect. The fight wasn't over. It would never be fully over, not in her lifetime, maybe not in her children's lifetimes. But every generation pushed the line a little further. Every act of courage made the next act slightly easier. Every person who refused to accept cruelty as normal made space for a world where it might someday become abnormal. That was the work. That was the calling. That was what Gate 42 had taught her. Thank you for watching Zara and Amara's story. If you believe in fairness and equality, if you think no child should ever be told they smell bad or that their kind doesn't belong anywhere, hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the Hyper Racism channel for more stories that expose discrimination and celebrate the courage it takes to fight back. What would you have done in Zara and Amara's shoes? Would you have stayed quiet to avoid confrontation, or found your voice even when it shook? Tell us in the comments. Do you think racial discrimination and prejudice can truly end? What concrete steps do you believe society needs to take to curb it? Is serving justice to individual offenders like Patricia Morrison enough? Or do we need deeper, systemic changes to how we educate, how we hire, and how we hold institutions accountable? Tell us your honest opinion, because these conversations matter. And if you want racism to become a thing of the past in our country and world at large, if you want to be like Zara, Amara, and Dorothy Banks, educating others and raising awareness about discrimination that too many people pretend doesn't exist, then share this video and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can turn painful moments into powerful movements. Together, we can ensure that no child ever again has to prove they belong in a seat they paid for, in a space they have every right to occupy, in a world that should celebrate their existence rather than question it. The Thompson sisters changed their corner of the world. Dorothy Banks changed hers. Marcus Thompson used his power for protection instead of profit. Now it's your turn. What will you do with your voice? How will you use your power? When will you decide that enough is enough? The answers to those questions will determine whether Gate 42 was just another viral moment that faded into nothing or the beginning of real, lasting change. The choice is yours. Choose wisely. Choose courageously. Choose to be the person who speaks up instead of looking away. Because the next Zara and Amara are out there right now, facing their own Patricia Morrison, waiting to see if anyone will stand up for them. Will it be you?